I had been to Morocco myself when I was just out of college.
That was my next question.
Yeah, many years before. So, I mean, it was overwhelming.
Yeah,
it was overwhelming. I had traveled to Europe. I had been abroad, a few times. But it was, it's an old culture.
Yes.
And it's a monarchy.
Yes, it is.
And it was even more of one then.
Yeah.
And so, and it's traditional culture.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just, it's very different than even traveling around Spain, right? Which is right across the way.
Right.
So
it's amazing how much a body of water can...
Very short distance.
Right.
Yeah. So that was really interesting. I mean, it was an amazing sort of, it took me a while to even digest all of it when I got back from that. And then to go back, all these years later, and see what had changed and what hadn't changed, was really interesting. I'm an older person myself too, and I've traveled a lot more. But that's what happened.
Yeah.
But it was really interesting, and this time to go there and actually work with Moroccan storytellers and perform with them, which was just an amazing, to really be much more connected to the place.
Yes,
and with the venues, the cafes where we performed.
Yep. So before we get to that, though, because I am going to ask you about the performance and some of your interactions with the Moroccan storytellers. But you just said, it was interesting to see what had changed and what had not. And we're talking a few decades or a couple decades or whatever. So what were some of the things that stood out, whether things that had changed or whether things that had not changed or a little of both?
I would say, to me, it seemed like mostly things had not changed a lot. That was my impression.
Yeah.
And I'm a very political person, so I'm always like, what's the political situation here?
Yeah.
So it's
tricky.
It's different.
Yeah.
But they've liberalized somewhat. But it's,
the Queen has not been seen for a long time, though.
Yeah.
I think there's still some stuff.
No,
I don't know if that's changed.
Yeah,
but that was the biggest.
No, it's a monarchy, and they have.
But it has changed.
Well,
it's the younger guy now than versus when you were there, and so I'm not saying there hasn't been some changes in progress. But
yes. So, but in that way, generally, it's still very much the same. And we spent time in Marrakesh, but we also spent time out in the countryside, Mouli Idris.
Yeah.
And so that's a very traditional place.
Yeah, tell me about that, because I haven't been.
Women of the, who live there do not go to the outdoor cafes. It's interesting because even there you will see young women who are all in Western dress, like blue jeans and things like that, side by side with most people in very traditional garb. But the women, they're saying if they wanted to go to a cafe, they would go to the next town over.
The next town over?
Yeah, where it was okay, but not in your own town. I don't know.
Wow.
This is what they were saying. But
so
there's a lot of traditional, and of course, coming back to wine, you can't just walk around with a bottle of wine.
And yet, something I learned doing the preparation for today's show, and that that's one of my next questions, was one of the things you guys did on your trip was you toured a vineyard.
We did.
And I had never heard of Moroccan wine, but it turns out the Phoenicians brought wine to Morocco. It's been there a long time. And then the Romans, it was big during ancient Rome. Right. So wine has been in Morocco for a long, long time. And the French actually invested a lot in when it was a colony, and then since the 90s, it's having a revival.
Yeah, and I think some of these folks who are from outside of Morocco can get a special, if I'm remembering correctly, so kind of a special commission to operate these places. So how that works, obviously it's a
But
culture.
Is there no alcohol? You're not allowed to drink alcohol in Morocco? I don't remember.
Well, you could drink it. I mean, you can drink it. They serve it in the hotels. I mean, obviously tourism is a big part of Morocco, so clearly they have it in the hotels. But just in terms of, particularly in these more outlying areas, we were just told by our Western hosts that don't just walk around toting a bottle of wine. So,
and then you had to drastically change your behavior.
Exactly.
What? I can't carry this around like I do at home.
Like I do at home.
I can't carry this around like when I'm driving. Not allowed to do that here.
Chugging from some Cabernet.